Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video, I got one for you today that begins in the realm of urban legend before crashing down to earth in the most shocking way possible. This case is gonna blow your minds. I'm sure you've all heard the urban legend of, the parent is setting up the baby monitor, and they accidentally connect to, a murderer or a serial killer or something like that. Well, that whole scenario became a horrifying reality one day that led to this bizarre plot of manipulation and of cults. Yeah. Before we get into it, please subscribe to see new stories for the dark every single week now. Let's give it a go. This story begins in the very small market town of Kurim in southeastern Czechia, Czech Republic. It's a place with about 10,000 to 11,000 people living there. Overall, it's a pretty kind of standard example of a small Czech town, and I don't have a whole lot of examples of small Czech towns. They're probably like small towns all over the world, except with more beer? Maybe? Basically, the small town of Kurim wasn't anywhere of note at all until this story took place, which then became known as the Kurim Case. On the morning of May 7th, 2007, a man named Edward, he was in full-on panic mode. That morning, his wife had gone into labor, and ETA on the baby? Right now, pal. So he was at home, doing his best to try and stay ahead in the ongoing mission of growing a baby. The latest weapon in his arsenal, folks, was a baby monitor, if you can believe that. It was the latest and greatest model that Edward and his wife could afford. So he was at home, obviously, as you can imagine, going out of his mind with his wife in a hospital, just trying to keep himself busy, trying to keep his mind busy while awaiting that phone call to, let him know that everybody was safe, the baby was healthy, all of that. So he was at home, right, setting up this baby monitor. In the baby's room, there was a receiver and then the monitor. So he's wiring it up, plugging it in, setting up the monitor, and then he had the receiver in his hand. He was looking at the receiver and he was pushing the buttons as it went from blank screen to blank screen, and eventually it would connect to the monitor and he would see, the baby's crib. Eventually he got a clear picture on his receiver. Happy days. But then he did, kind of a double take, because the image he was looking at on the receiver was not what the monitor was pointing at. He was expecting to see the wooden crib that was right across from him that he had spent an entire afternoon putting together with nothing more than a screwdriver and pure rage. But that's not what he saw on the receiver. What he saw was a child, and not one that he recognized. The boy on the screen wasn't a baby. He looked older, a little bit older than that, maybe as young as 6 years old, but no older than 8, and the boy seemed to be quite contentedly playing by himself. But Edward thought it was odd that in the image it looked like this young boy was naked, and he appeared to be bound. It looked like he was in a basement, right? It was dark, as you can see, and he was just playing with a ball of tape. Just how bad the situation was didn't register for poor Edward, who had found this. Not yet, right? Edward kind of kept going through the receiver, and eventually he found the correct pairing, so his monitor was set up, but he was still kind of thinking about what he had just seen. But then, the phone rings. It's the hospital. Edward races to the nearby hospital. His wife is there, and his newborn baby is there. They are happy, they are healthy, and Edward kind of just forgets about what he had, just seen. Maybe the receiver had caught some other signal that was, entirely innocent. However, as the day goes on and he, eventually leaves the hospital that evening, it kind of just crops up in his head again about what was that? What had he caught? What signal had he captured? So he goes home and he sets up the receiver again, goes through all the frequencies. He finds it again. Something about it just did not sit right. Though he couldn't say what it was exactly, there was definitely something off. After all, why would anybody keep a camera in their basement? When he found it, the little boy was right there as he had been hours before, which struck him again as odd. This child was clearly being held there, in place. And the more Edward studied the image, the more his heart and stomach seemed to switch places. The boy's hands were still bound, and he hadn't tied them himself, as Edward first thought. The gravity of what this was finally hit him, and Edward knew this was extremely wrong. He immediately pressed the record on the baby monitor in case he lost the signal or something happened. That's when Edward called the police. He had to show them this. The police did respond as urgently as you would want them to. After all, Edward was still kind of hoping that this was entirely innocent. But, when it's a kid, it looks like they're in a basement, looks like they're bound in a basement, you kind of don't really want to take any chances here with this one. The officers arrived and Edward showed them the monitor, as quickly as he could, and he explained the situation. And the officers knew they had to move fast, right? You can't muck about with this kind of thing. But they also knew that baby monitors and the signal it had caught was also from a baby monitor. And baby monitors don't have a very large signal, so therefore, the source of this camera, it's got to be close by. They asked Edward, "Is none of your neighbours? Do they have a young boy?" Edward said he didn't recognize this kid, but do any of your neighbours have young kids or are visited often by young kids? Edward said, "Well, never seen that kid in this neighbourhood, and I ain't seen any young fellas around these parts lately." He did know one of his neighbours had a teenage daughter and 2 young boys, but he hadn't seen the young boys in a while, so probably unlikely to be them. The officers decided they needed to go house to house, working outwards. In the end, though, they didn't need to go too far at all. At one of the first houses the officers visited, they were greeted at the door by a 30-year-old teaching student named Klara Maurova, and her older sister, a 32-year-old social worker named Katerina Maurova. So, knocking on their door. At first, these 2 sisters, the Maurova sisters, they were very helpful, forthcoming with the police. "No, ain't got no young boys here. Do you have a 13-year-old daughter, teenage daughter here, but no boys allowed. This is a girls only house. Just her 13-year-old adopted daughter named Annika, or Anna." So the officers though asked, "Hey, do you mind if we just have a go around, right? Just to, it'll make us happy if we do." And that's when though, they did not like that at all. Let me tell you, Klara and Katrina were like, how about no, right? Our adopted daughter, Anna, she wouldn't like it if you come in. She doesn't like other strangers in the house at all. She would be greatly distressed if she saw police officers coming into the home. The officers insisted, however, and eventually Klara and Katrina decided, okay, you can have a quick look.
Snoop around.
And the officers went in, had a look around the house, and at first when they were looking around this place, they couldn't really understand why the Maurovas were so reluctant to let the police in. And they also didn't see, 13-year-old Anna anywhere in the house, but that didn't really bother them. They weren't looking for a teenage girl, they were looking for a young boy. But then, at the rear of the house, they find a locked door. Judging by the layout of the house, this door must have had to lead down to a basement, which was exactly what they were looking for. So then they ask Klara, who owned the house, "We got a key? Let us in." And Klara says, "What's that doing there? I've never opened that door in my life. The landlord never gave me the key, if you can believe that." The officers didn't buy it, and they left. They only half believed the women, and they returned to Edward's house and asked to see the monitor again. They rewound the footage that had been taken, and the officers noticed something. As they were looking at the receiver, the sounds were coming out, and they heard on the monitor the same song that had been playing in the Maurova home. One of the officers decided to turn the volume up full whack, and then he had a gotcha moment. He could hear Klara's voice and his own voice coming from the receiver. It was a conversation they'd just been having. That camera was in that home. That's when they went right back to Klara's house and demanded they be let into the basement. It seemed like there was definitely a kid imprisoned down there, but that is when Klara's 13-year-old adopted daughter Anna appeared. Only Anna appeared far, far younger than her supposed 13 years. She came out crawling on all fours, shouting, "Mommy, Mommy," like a much younger child. And instead of going over to her adopted mother, Klara, she clung to Katerina like an infant. The officers assumed Anna must be developmentally disabled or something like that, and they kept trying to get through this door when all of a sudden Anna threw herself between the officers and the door, trying to stop them from busting it down. In the end, the officers had to call assistance from the nearby fire department, and then they finally gained entry to the basement where it appeared a child was imprisoned. As soon as the door was opened, everyone present was immediately overcome by an overwhelming stench. At the bottom of the stairs, the rescue workers were met with a sight that none of them will ever forget. In the dark, dirty, damp basement was the little boy in the images from the baby monitor. Only now, in vivid detail, the situation was so much worse than on the tiny screen of the receiver. In the basement was the young boy they had been looking for. His name was Jakub Maurova, Clara's 8-year-old son. But Jakub was not alone. They also found Clara's other son, his little brother, 6-year-old Andre. The conditions in the basement were beyond dire. The little boys were cold and weak, but unlike their adopted sister, both of the boys, astonishingly, came across as calm and pleasant children. When Jakub was rescued by the firefighters, he simply just looked up and smiled at them as they came to save him. Clara and Katrina were both, as you can imagine, immediately taken into custody for severe abuse of, two boys.
10 let ve věznici se zvýšenou ostrahou. Jana Škrlu a Hanu Bašovou, kteří ani dnes do Olomouce nedorazili, čeká 7 let ve věznici s ostrahou. Jana Turka potrestali soudci 5letým vězením.
But what the shit was going on in this house of horrors? In the aftermath of the grim discovery, reporters flocked to the previously quiet little town. There wasn't a national news bulletin that went by that didn't mention the situation in Kurim. Publicly, the case was met with equal amounts of horror and confusion at how anyone could inflict so much pain and suffering on the innocent and vulnerable, and even worse, on their own children. People wanted to help the 3 young children, the 2 boys and adopted Anna. The 2 boys who had been physically abused, Anna perhaps mentally. The 3 children were all taken to a children's home where they could be assessed, physically and mentally to make sure what kind of state they were in. The 2 boys, who had suffered the worst, showed themselves to be remarkably resilient. They were kind, they were pleasant, they were polite, they were eager to play, eager to learn. Anna, though, was far more awkward than the 2 others. She just kept on demanding to see Clara and her aunt Katrina. She would not, settle down or stop. Like the police had assumed earlier, everybody just assumed that Anna was developmentally disabled and had experienced other different kinds of trauma than her younger brothers had. That was when something happened that no one saw coming, because Anna disappeared. Somehow, 13-year-old Anna had escaped the children's center. Anna had crawled out of a window that the workers at the center assumed was impossible for a child to open, and then she just vanished. A huge search began for this missing and very vulnerable young teenager, right? Meanwhile, though, specially trained police officers, social workers began sitting down with Jakub and Andre to, ask them questions, and they began interrogating, obviously, Clara and Katrina about what was going on. What had they done in this house of horrors in Kurim? And speaking of, listen up folks, being on the run, doing a legger, being on Audi 5000, you need to be good if you don't want to be found. You might even say you need the best. And the best requires the best, which is why I use the greatest, the GOAT, NordVPN. Why? Well, NordVPN makes sure I am not tracked. It hides my IP address. You know what that means. I can be anywhere in the world I wanna be. I'm a ghost. Look, I'm in Ireland. You must be mistaken. I'm in Japan. Konnichiwa. I often come across, this content is not available in your location. And frankly, folks, I just won't have it. I just don't put up with it anymore. And I don't need to now, because I can access any content I want from anywhere in the world I want. And I've been through this rigmarole before. I've tried a few different VPNs. Nord, it's the fastest, it's the best, it's the most reliable. But it ain't just a reliable VPN. Nord doesn't only keep your location safe and secure by hiding your IP address with their more than 6,000 Nord servers around the world. Nord also has incredible features like Nord's Mesh Net, where you can safely connect to any other device in the world. Or how about a password manager to save the countless passwords you need these days? A data scanner, a dark web monitor that gives you alerts if your credentials have been leaked where bad boys can get them. Or let's talk about Nord's threat protection that blocks nefarious websites and advertisements. It scans files for you and stops you being tracked. Nord's goal is and always has been to make the internet better than it is today, free from surveillance, free from censorship, free from threats. Things I think we can all get behind, because the internet, listen folks, that seems to be all the rage these days. People are getting threats, people are getting shut down, people are getting everything. But not on Nord's watch. So it becomes safer with a click by downloading NordVPN today. And if you use my special little link, that is nordvpn.com/thatchapter, you can get an exclusive deal that is just for you. They told me it was just for you, and I said, are you serious? Yeah. They said they're mad about you. You can get an incredible discount on Nord's 2-year plans, and not just that, you can get 4 months extra for free. Get that here at nordvpn.com/thatchapter, and it's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, so you know. Listen, they got that guarantee, folks. They will take the absolute best care of you. Nord is your all-in-one, keep you safe and private and secure on the internet, yoke thingy. Thank you so much to NordVPN for supporting that chapter. Now let's get back to this insane story. Yeah. And so the police were eventually able to kind of paint, a little bit of a picture as to what had happened over the previous few years. And it was horrors beyond comprehension, the horrors they had been through. It was way worse than anybody had expected. And the thing was, years previously, it wasn't always this way. As it turns out, Clara, she was a great mom to her 2 sons, Jakob and Andre. Growing up, they had never wanted for anything. Her husband, or their father, the boy's father, was out of the picture, but yeah, the 2 boys, happy, healthy, they're great mom Clara and their great aunt Katrina. Things were fantastic. She sometimes struggled, but she never, let her boys want for anything. They had good, healthy lives growing up in this small town. But all that changed with the arrival of Anna. Anna was an orphan, and she was originally from Norway. Katrina, the auntie, had met Anna as her work as a social worker, and she had met her in 2006. I guess Katrina really took pity on young Anna, and she wanted to take care of her, and so Clara already had 2 kids of her own. She was like, well, I'll adopt her, and we can all live together. Katrina, Clara, Anna, and the 2 boys, they could all live together as one big happy family. And Katrina told Clara about Anna's long list of pretty serious health issues, including leukemia, if you can believe that. Her health was pretty fragile, and she needed basically constant attention. And Anna had told Katrina, one of the reasons why Katrina had taken pity on her was, well, Anna growing up, she had suffered horrendous abuse as a kid, and that just melted their hearts. That combined with her health issues, they had to adopt her, take her in. Fortunately, Katrina was able to get Anna a specialist doctor who would see and take care of her myriad health issues that she was going through. Every couple of weeks, Katrina would take Anna to the hospital for treatment for, leukemia. Strangely, Clara, who was her adopted mom at this stage, was never allowed to accompany Anna to the hospital, only Katrina, who was her aunt. And Clara, in fact, only met this doctor, one time, and even that was in a car park, and it was so dark she couldn't even see this doctor's face. So she would just get messages, texts, and emails from this doctor with instructions of how to take care of Anna and, treat her various ailments. During one of Anna's longer hospital stays, she was unconscious in the bed at one point. The doctor called up Clara and says, you need to speak to her, even though she won't hear you. And Clara did. She would kind of do anything to help her newly adopted daughter. But that wasn't the strangest instruction this doctor would give Clara Marova. Throughout all of this, it did seem like Katerina knew a lot more about what was going on with Anna than her own adopted mother did. Katerina was the one who took her to the hospital, met with the doctor all the time, yada yada yada. But I guess Clara just thought, well, Katerina met her first, she's a social worker, leave it at that. For example, one instruction the doctor gave to Clara was to give Anna full body massages. Yeah. With special attention, you don't need me to say it, you know where this is going. Special attention to certain parts of Anna. The gullible Clara did as she was told. Things then took a huge turn when the doctor told Clara that the treatments were not working because the 2 boys, her own sons, who were 5 and 7 years old at the time, were being mean to Anna. The doctor told Clara, you need to discipline your own sons better. They're treating Anna, very badly, and that's delaying her, getting better. Don't be afraid of the corporal punishments. Get the whip out. Why don't you? After all, Anna will only get better if you beat your own sons, which Clara did. The punishments now started small, well, not necessarily small, but compared to where they would end up, they definitely started small. Things like hitting them with the wooden spoon, locking them in closets and in cupboards, and that kind of thing. But the intensity kind of escalated quite quickly. The doctor was still saying, that's not enough, you need to hit them and beat them more, and Anna was like, my brothers are being mean to me. They're still being mean to me, even though you're hitting them and stuff like that. It's not working. You need to hit them more. Clara was even told, you need to stop seeing Andre and Jakob as your own children. You need to stop viewing them as your own children. They're little monsters. Just to remind you, which is completely insane. Jakob and Andre were her own biological children, and the doctor was saying, no, they're not. Don't worry about them. Anna is most important. Beat them. She obliged and began beating her own sons for the tiniest of infractions, but still was told that was not good enough. The boys needed shock therapy. This is very sick. Under the instruction of the doctor, Clara took her two sons to a cottage in the woods, and there that would be hell for the boys. At that cottage, she met with two men, Jan Skurla, Jan Turek, along with another woman named Hanna Basova. Manson lamps if ever I saw them. This part is dark when you kind of really get into the abuse of the two boys that happened in a cottage. And you know me, I don't like getting into graphic detail at all. Just a warning though, if you want to kind of close your ears for the next little bit, I'll put a red dot for when it's safe to start listening again. Throughout the stay there, while Clara, Katarina, Anna, the two Jans, and Hannah, they all slept in comfort and were having a great time. The two boys were forced to sleep in like dog cages. They couldn't stand up. They were regularly beaten by all of the adults in this place for the slightest infraction, of course, and pretty much all of these infractions were imagined by their prison wardens. Anna, of course, was also involved in punishing the boys, and at times, though, she would join in with them and pretend she was also being punished. And of course, she would just make up tales about how the boys are still being cruel. You're not beating them hard enough. One of the cruelest ones, though, wasn't the physical abuse the two boys endured, it was the psychological. For example, one time Andre was made to give Jakob a drink. And then after Andre gave Jakob the drink, Jakob was taken away and told to lie down in this hole in the dirt. Andre was then brought over and saw his brother lying in this hole in the dirt and told, you just gave your brother poison and now he's dead. If you obey all our orders and do what we tell you to do, your brother will come back to life. And so, as you can imagine, this young boy just believed he killed his own brother. He tearfully agreed, and then Jakob sprung back up to life. This is insane. However, as bad as all of this is, the worst part wouldn't be until the very end of their 8 days in this cottage, when the adults took Andre and they cut off chunks of his flesh and made him and Jakob eat it. Then they cauterized the wounds with cigarettes. That's about as graphic as we will get, but the story is not, there's a lot more crazy to come. Soon after they returned from the cottage in September 2006, Clara began the official adoption of Anna. It turns out that the adoption court never actually saw the real Anna, with Katarina using the daughter of a local she knew to pose as Anna for the required court appearances. For a short period, the boys lived with Katarina, while Clara lived alone with Anna. Finally, the family reunited and moved into the Kurim home, where the abuse would finally be discovered and come to an end in May 2007. Why Clara and Katarina went along with all of this remains unknown. Clara, the mother, I think she was just very stupid, very naive, and highly manipulatable by basically everybody around her, and she just went... I mean, you'd be amazed, when you think about perfectly nice, because she was always described as a great mother up until this point. You'd be amazed what you can get nice, regular-ass people to do. You can convince them to do some unthinkable things to their own family members. Katarina, on the other hand, she was just evil. She was a part of the manipulation. She was like the secretive one who always seemed to know a little bit more about what was going on, and I think she just got off on the abuse of the two boys. It seemed like Katarina was always hiding info from her sister Clara about Anna, hiding info about the doctor, about these other people, the two Jans and Hannah they had met at this cottage in the woods. Katarina definitely knew more about what was going on. So, though, back to 2007, right? Katarina and Clara Finally, in custody, the two boys, Andre and Jakob, are safe and secure. But Anna was nowhere to be found. Well, hold on to your hats, folks, because things are about to get a lot more weird. The thing about Anna was she didn't actually exist. Anna's real name, unbeknownst to the woman who had been raising her for almost 2 years, Anna's real name was Barbara Skrylova. Now, you might not recognize Barbara's name, but you probably do recognize a movie that is very loosely based on this story. The movie is called Orphan.
My name is Esther.
Why aren't you down at the party?
I've never really seen the point of it. I guess I'm different.
Yeah, that's her. But folks, the movie doesn't hold a candle to what actually happened. You see, the sickly 13-year-old that Clara had known as Anna was, in fact, a 31-year-old woman named Barbara. She was a year older than her adopted mom, Clara. The movie renames 13-year-old Anna, or Barbara, to 9-year-old orphan Esther, played by Isabel Fuhrman, who is adopted by a couple who slowly begin to realize that something is not quite right with their adopted daughter. As you can imagine, it turns out that Esther isn't a 9-year-old orphan, but an adult woman named Lena and an absolute psychopath posing as a child, a serial killer. The psychopath part, well, that's one of the few things the movie took from the real story. You see, the sickly 13-year-old that Clara had known as Anna was a year older than Clara herself. In the movie Orphan, it's explained that the character has a real-life condition that causes her to have proportional dwarfism, making her look younger than she was. Barbara, though, she did not have any medical condition. And she definitely didn't have the leukemia she claimed she had. She'd in fact gone to great and twisted lengths to be better able to keep the illusion going and make herself seem like a child. Remember all those times Anna would be taken to the hospital, treated by doctors, taken to the hospital by Katerina? She did go to the hospital, but she was going to the hospital for different kinds of surgeries. She was going for breast reduction surgery. She was going for liposuction to just make herself seem younger than she was. Not a 31-year-old woman, a 13-year-old girl. Despite Barbara, as Anna, telling Clara that she was sexually abused as a child, well, doctors would find out, no, she was actually a virgin the whole time, which just makes the fact that she was in her 30s just all the more strange about who she really was.
Ondry a Jakuba, 5 ze 6
The
obžalovaných.
investigation was pretty much just a constant stream of shocking revelations for detectives, and eventually for prosecutors as well. Not only was the supposed leukemia a convenient mask for the real medical procedures Barbara was undergoing, but remember this mysterious doctor who, Anna was always going to go see, who was giving her these medical procedures, the doctor who was calling Clara saying, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to, touch her, you need to beat your own kids. Well, every email and text that Clara received claiming to be from this doctor was actually from Barbara herself or from Katerina. They were both pretending to be this doctor. So all of the abuse and all of the sick shit was coming from Barbara herself and Katerina, who was in it. On the one occasion that Clara did actually meet the doctor in a car park where she said she really couldn't see his face, well, that man turned out to be one Josef Skrla. He was Barbara's real father. Jan Skrla, one of the guys from the abuse cottage where the two boys had been abused and cannibalized, that was Barbara's brother. Her whole family was a part of this charade. Sick as shit charade. All of this was completely unknown by Clara, who was just taken in by the ruse. The idea to create her whole new identity for Barbara, to invent herself as Anna, this was all Barbara's idea. She got Katerina to go along with it to help, get a real birth cert. They managed to get her a brand new birth cert showing she was 13 years of age. Barbara then invented the story of becoming an orphan when her parents died, being placed, into an orphanage, and then, being horribly abused, tortured, and sold by those who were supposed to take care of her. When this abuse was uncovered, that's when Barbara, or, Anna, met Katerina, and from there, yada yada yada, you know the rest. Or that is what the story was, anyway, and Barbara stuck to it like glue. And Clara, for her part, had somehow become obsessed with the real tearjerker that Anna had spun, constantly worrying about her past trauma to the point where she would do anything, and I mean anything, to help this poor young girl. Though of course, Anna wasn't poor, she wasn't young, and that wasn't even her real name. In reality, Barbara Skurlova was the eldest of 3 children. Her mother a doctor, her father a, well, sort of weirdo cult leader, to be honest. Growing up, Barbara wasn't exactly normal, as you can, hey, listen, you probably could have guessed that yourself. She stayed by her lonesome a lot. She loved nature and being out in the woods. She did have an underactive thyroid, which made her smaller than people around her, but not like, child-sized small. But in her head, oh boy, she was. She was a very strange woman, which, just in case you haven't gotten that already. It was when Barbara was in her early 20s. That was when she met Katerina. They, in fact, worked together at that youth center that Katerina worked at. Over time, for some bizarre reason, in some kind of weird fantasy, Barbara, with the help of Katerina and her own family, began to become someone else. At first, Barbara was, an attention-starved woman, inside with childlike tendencies, and so it was for sympathy. But it quickly became a lot more than that. Then eventually, Katerina introduced Barbara, or Anna, to her sister Clara, and you know the rest of the story from there. Katerina was faking everything to her own sister about who Barbara or Anna really was. The fake story of Anna. She faked documents. She faked hospital visits. Lying to her own sister about who this person was the entire time. Anytime they had to go to the courts for the adoption process to prove that Anna was in fact a 13-year-old girl, it would be Katerina who would go, and she would take the neighbor's daughter, who was an actual teen. So why did this woman, with the help of her own family and of Katerina, who was obviously mentally disturbed, why did she change her identity from being 30 years old to 13 years old, insert herself into the Marova family, and just begin abusing them all? Why did she do it? It didn't seem like it was for financial gain. She didn't make money out of this or whatever. The only thing they got out of it was fulfilling their sick, disturbing fascination. That's really all they got. Of course, as more and more facts came out, investigators picked up Hanna Basova and the 2 Jans. But it would take a lot longer to track down Barbara. Remember, as Anna, she had escaped the children's facility. In mid-December 2007, 7 months after the events in Czechia, and Barbara still on the run, that's when a 13-year-old boy named Adam went missing from a children's home in Oslo, where he'd been living for the previous few months. Obviously, people were frantic to find this missing boy, and he was considered very vulnerable. His school principal at a school in Oslo where he was attending, she was interviewed, and she would say, yeah, he had, started attending school a few months before. This young Adam fella, nice, quiet guy, could be a bit odd, didn't really take part in gym or anything like that, but yeah, he was vulnerable. Seemed like he had a few mental and physical issues, and he'd come from Czechia. His sudden disappearance sparked obviously a huge search all across Norway, which was running parallel to the search in Czechia for missing Barbara. You know where this is going. You know where this is going, big dog. Yep, this time Barbara hadn't only changed her name, she had changed her gender. She was now hiding in Norway, pretending to not be a 13-year-old girl named Anna, pretending to be a 13-year-old boy named Adam. Adam, by the way, was a real missing boy from the Czech Republic, who was eventually found safe and sound. Regardless, she got into a children's facility there, pretending to be an abandoned child, and enrolled in the school. And it would be in January 2008, about a month after she disappeared from Oslo, that she would finally be tracked down to a town called Tromsø in northern Norway, this Arctic town. He was, or she was, recognized by a guy who had seen, the missing poster for Adam back in Oslo. As soon as the teenage boy or adult woman was taken into custody, the Norwegian police said, oh, check it out. This is a wanted woman in Czechia. They shipped her back.
Policista do vozidla a odváží postupně do brněnské vazební věznice. Ten transport byl velmi dobře hlídaný a Barbara Škrlová je v současné době tady ve vazební věznici. Ironií osudu.
She was sent back to face the Kurim abuse charges. So as I said, the big question hanging over everybody's head is why? Why did this even happen? What did anybody gain out of the abuse and the sick and the yada yada yada? The answer to that is kind of frustratingly another question, because how much of a victim was Barbara herself in all of this. She had certainly suffered abuse. I mean, nobody, who grew up in a normal environment could do what she did. See, the truth likely lies with Barbara Skurla's own family. Her dad, Josef Skurla, the doctor, he was in fact a member of a cult called the Ants. Not much is known about the Ants cult, but one notable thing is that the cult has this method of breaking people down to build them back up in whatever way they want. They're known as a very violent cult, which is likely what influenced the treatment of the two boys. Though the whole, cutting chunks of flesh off, I think that was their own bright idea. I don't think the Ants can take credit for that one. Obviously, the very nature of this whole thing being a cult makes it all shrouded in mystery, and the other members of the cult have always kind of zipped the lip. But Josef was a member of the cult, Barbara herself was a member, her brother was a member, Katerina was a member of this very strange cult that I have really been unable to find out any information. But I guess that's one of the cult's tenets, is instruct your members to have weird medical procedures so they will seem like children, insert themselves into families, and then begin disturbing and sick-ass abuse. In the end, Barbara was charged and tried for criminal deception, which related to her posing as a 13-year-old boy at the children's home in Norway. She was actually found not guilty of the charges. But it was out of the frying pan and into the fire for our Babs though, as she was immediately rearrested on the abuse charges. The court cases for each of those charged, Klara Marova, Katerina Marova, Jan Skurla, Jan Turek, Hanna Basova, and of course Barla Skurlova, was a huge deal in Czechia and lasted a lot of time. Josef, by the way, who seems like one of the main members of this cult, the dad, the doctor, he was never arrested or charged with anything. Yeah. Though researching into him, I think he might also be an arms dealer. So if you ever hear about old Mike shooting himself 5 times in the back of the head, you know what's up. However, all of the people who were arrested were found guilty. But this part will frustrate you likely just as much as it frustrated me, folks. Klara and Katerina received the most severe sentences as the main perpetrators of the abuse, with Klara getting 9 whole years and Katerina 10 whole years. Jan Turek got 5, and Jan Skurla and Hanna Basova each got 7 years apiece. Barbara Skurlova, who became the figurehead of the case and whose story has morphed into a modern-day urban legend, received a shocking and whopping 5 whole years, folks. That's 5. Which means that, let me just check my watch here, that as I'm telling you this story, all are out and free right now. Thanks for watching, psychos! So amazingly, a little kind of postscript to this whole story is that this is not the first and only time this has happened. It's a case of art imitating life, with that movie Orphan made about Anna's story, and then another story in America imitating that movie. You probably would have heard of this one, the story of Natalia Grace. An Indiana-based couple, Christine and Michael Barnett, adopted a 6-year-old Ukrainian orphan named Natalia Grace. She first had come to the US in 2008, and after living with a variety of foster parents, was placed with the Barnetts. According to the Barnetts, though, they would say, shortly after adopting her, they noticed, she's a bit weird. This is like that movie The Orphan we just watched 5 times. They found her to be unusually advanced in a lot of ways. She had begun menstruating and she was only a child. She had adult teeth. They would find knives hidden in her room. They would believe she placed thumbtacks on the stairs that were placed they believed for themselves or their own biological children. So they were freaked out and believed that Natalia was not in fact a 8-year-old girl, but was in fact an adult. As I said, it's believed they probably just saw the movie Orphan. The Barnetts later told the media they were terrified of her, that she was going to stab them in their sleep. They eventually came to believe that Natalia was in fact a con woman, just like Barbara, and so they basically kicked her out of the house. They got her an apartment and then they in fact left the country. They went to a court and changed her legal birth record from being 8 years old to 22. After they'd kicked Natalia out, who was severely disabled regardless of anything else, another Indiana couple, Bishop Antoine and Cynthia Mans, invited her to live with them instead. And none of this came out until 2019, when Indiana prosecutors discovered the case and brought charges of neglect against the Barnetts, who, well, the Barnetts themselves decided to go on a mini press tour to share their claims of Natalia being an adult posing as a child, which is how this story kind of got famous in the first place.
How old do you think she is at the time?
Okay, at that moment,
6.
But questions about Natalia's age surfaced the first night they brought her home. Barnett was urgently called into the bathroom by his wife, who was bathing Natalia.
She's got this look on her face. She's white as a ghost. She's scared. And she just says, "Look."
You think you have a 6-year-old in your house, and there are signs that she's already gone through puberty, which would make her much older than 6 years old.
Yeah.
And they say there was something else.
She's got a monthly cycle, and she's hiding it. And I'm stunned.
There was another red flag.
Technically, she is a Ukrainian adoptee. She's never spoken a word of it. She doesn't have a hint of an accent.
Hello and happy Thanksgiving.
The Barnett's claims were what really drew attention. In addition to the accusations of hiding knives and laying traps to attacks, they also accused her of inappropriate behavior towards adult males, which is more or less the exact plot of Orphan. The headlines all reference the horror movie, and the public seemed to buy it all hook, line, and the rest. And the story seemed all but confirmed when the couple were found not guilty of neglect. The thing is though, they were full of shit. And as I said, I think they probably just watched the movie Orphan too many times. Natalia, it seems like she had some kind of developmental disorders. Maybe she was weird by placing knives there. But she was an actual child.
DNA test results finally confirmed the true age of little Natalia Grace.
Prosecutors were able to track and trace Natalia's birth mother in Ukraine. Her birth mother was born in 1979. The Burnetts had changed Natalia's birth records so that she was born in 1989. That would mean that Natalia's birth mother was only 10 years old when she gave birth, which seemed unlikely. So yeah, they abandoned a child, but it seems like she's doing all right these days. And to leave you on a, this is a very heavy case, to leave you guys on a lighter note, the two young kids in this case, Jakub and Andrei Maurova, they're doing all right now. They were both the real and completely innocent victims in this case. They showed themselves to be very brave, amazingly resilient, and then they did eventually grow up into two brave, well-rounded young fellows. Since Clara was released, her sons have since moved back in with her, saying, quote, "If you get hurt by someone who took the benefit from you with high hopes, learn to respect them and take them as the biggest teacher of yours, because if your life is going smoothly, you become a delicate person. If, on the other hand, you experience tragic circumstances, you develop inner power and courage to face them." So it just goes to show that with the right intervention and the right help, the cycle of abuse can be broken, and that survivors can go on to live happy and healthy lives as they deserve to. Thank you so much for watching. It means the absolute world to me. I hope you enjoyed this all batshit as all hell story. Next old video will be up, up every Tuesday, so please give it a go. Or you can check out the That Chapter Patreon, where for $2 a month you get every episode ad-free and a day early. Or you can check out the That Chapter podcast, which is free and available on all podcast platforms, which features completely unique stories to what I talk about here on the channel, and also listener stories, where folks become a part of the podcast, sending us in their weirdest and creepiest experiences. So until I see you or you hear from me, take care of each other and take care of yourselves, because I love you. Mike out.